we were made in the image of God, and God is the God we know, as we learn, and we'll talk about a little bit in the Theophany now, the one who is in communion with his Son and the Spirit for all eternity. God would be another kind of God, if you will, if he were a monad, I guess is the word to use. Okay? We're made in God's image. We are the people we are because of the people that we are interconnected with. Our human personhood, sometimes our personalities, come out of the people we interface with. Okay? So the idea that this takes place and is affected within a community is a very important component. When David is confronted by Nathan, I don't think it was in a private room. It was right in his courtroom with everybody else all around there. When Joshua talks about to Achan, the whole community finds out what happened, why they didn't win the battle of Ai, because it affected the whole community. So in Semitic thought, that this has a communal context of some level and some sort is very important. And that's why when we read Matthew 18, the majority of that chapter is about what do you do with somebody who's sinning within the community. It's really the whole process that they use. You go and you talk to the person. Okay, Jesus says. If that doesn't work, go with somebody else. And one of the reasons, and many of the early Christians commented on this, was the reason you take another person is not to gang up on the other guy, but also make sure that as I'm the one going to talk, am I off the wall? Am I okay? Am I right? Am I discerning right? Because all of Matthew 18 is how do you discern what happens? How do we discern what's real here? Okay? And the whole process of then, if that doesn't work, you bring it to the elders and you bring it to the church and so on and so forth. So there's a process that's talked about. Now, when that passage ends in the pericope that Jesus has, he says, of course, where two or three are gathered, there I am. And that has been popularly taken as meaning just a generic, where two or three people get together, pray, God's there. All right, that is a truism, but that's not what that verse is specifically connected to. The two or three gathered there, and the implication, by the way, in Greek, is towards the divine name I am, the God who's revealed himself and reveals. Ego eimi on, the same name that God gives in the burning bush and so on and so forth, has to do with discerning what to do with the situation of the person in that community. Whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, whatever you loose on earth will be loose in heaven. That's in that same context. What's going on here? The keys of the kingdom. Binding and loosing, binding and loosing. Again, pronouncing what is bound and what is loosened. And regarding the people that God has called into ministry to be the quote-unquote echo chambers of that reality. Okay? James chapter 5, very interesting, talks about if somebody's sick. And again, they understood that sin and sickness sometimes had an interconnection. Not that everybody that is sick is a result of their own personal wrongdoing. But we also know this, and I think it's fair to say that in Scripture, the overall approach to sickness and sin is, and I mean even injuries of psychological, emotional kinds, not just physical, can be either A, because of my personal choice to do wrong, to sin, to be hurtful. The second level is within my immediate circle, like somebody smoking in the house, and we know about this, where the person, they may not get any lung disease, but the kids wind up having asthma and emphysema because of somebody else smoking in the house. And then there's the third level where there's just a general pollution of a society that feels we don't need God. We're going to do everything our way, and we're not going to do things God's way. So there's a general pollution that affects even the innocent. So while there can be things that we do that affect us personally because of our personal choices, there's also stages that Scripture understands that they're due to the choices of others. And that's not to take away our personal responsibility when we are doing something. But it's also because of other people too. So we always have to gauge that. But when it comes, for instance, to a child, no kid ever sins. What baby sins? And that's why Jesus is very intense about hurting children in that way.